June 19, 1944.
10:36 Uhr morgens.
25,000 feet above the Philippine Sea. The morning sun blazes through the canopy of Commander David McCampbell's F-6F-5 Hellcat, turning the Pacific waters below into a sheet of hammered silver. His leather-gloved hand rests light on the control stick as he banks the fighter into a gentle turn, leading his 8-plane division in a wide patrol arc west of Task Force 58. The Pratt & Whitney are 2,800 engine thrums with 2,000 horsepower of reliable American Muscle A sound that's become as familiar to McCampbell as his own heartbeat after 18 months of carrier combat. At 34 years old, McCampbell is ancient by fighter pilot standards. Most of the boys flying off the USS Essex and her sister carriers are barely old enough to buy a legal drink back home. But age has its advantages. While they're all eager trigger fingers and white-knuckle enthusiasm, McCampbell carries something more valuable: patience. And on a morning like this, with the fate of the Pacific War hanging in the balance somewhere beyond that hazy western horizon, patience might be the difference between victory and a watery grave. His radio crackles. Vampire to all fighters. Carvu conditions holding. Stay frosty. The voice belongs to Lieutenant Roy Rushing, his wingman, always professional even when the adrenaline's pumping. McCampbell keys his MIC twice in acknowledgement, no need for chatter when Japanese radar operators might be listening. Behind him, spread across 3 miles of sky, the Combat Air Patrol consists of 450 American fighters, the largest defensive fighter screen ever assembled in naval history. They orbit in layers above the fast carrier task force, 58 warships arranged in 4 massive groups, their wakes cutting white furrows through the blue. Below, on the flight deck of Essex, Air Group 15 deck crews sweat through their dungarees in the equatorial heat, preparing the next wave of aircraft. Hellcats. Helldivers. Avengers. The newest, deadliest naval aviation technology America can produce, flown by pilots who've trained for 2 years on average. McCampbell knows the statistics because he helped write them as commander of Air Group 15. He's responsible for every plane, every pilot, every mission. The weight of that responsibility sits heavy on his shoulders, heavier than the .50 caliber ammunition feeding his 6 wing-mounted Browning machine guns. But it's the enemy he's thinking about now. Out there, somewhere beyond the curve of the Earth, the Japanese mobile fleet is steaming closer. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commands 9 carriers, 5 battleships, and a determination to stop the American advance toward the Philippines at any cost. Intelligence reports from the submarines that shadowed the Japanese fleet through the night suggest Ozawa will launch his strike soon. Very soon. McCampbell checks his instruments for the 100th time. Fuel, 3/4. Ammunition, 2,400 rounds across all 6 guns. Oxygen, flowing smooth. The Hellcat is a dream to fly, stable and forgiving in ways the old Wildcat never was. Its thick armor plating and self-sealing fuel tanks have earned it a reputation as the plane that brings pilots home. McCampbell's flown enough missions to appreciate that quality. He's seen too many empty bunks, too many personal effects shipped home in cardboard boxes. The radio erupts. Vampire leader, this is base. Bandits inbound, Vector 270, distance 60 miles. Raid count looks heavy. Real heavy. McCampbell's pulse quickens, but his hands stay steady. This is it. The moment they've been preparing for. He keys the MIC copy, base. All Vampire aircraft, arm weapons and prepare to engage. Stay with your sections. By the numbers. He flips the master arm switch. Charging handles on his 6 guns cycle back and forward with mechanical precision, chambering rounds. The gun sight on his windscreen glows amber. His world narrows to essentials: airspeed, altitude, angle, and the enemy he hasn't seen yet.
Taglio.
The call comes from a division leader 15 miles north. Multiple bogies, high and level, heading for the task force. McCampbell cranes his neck, scanning the western sky. And then he sees them. Not 1 formation. Not 2. The entire western horizon is dark with aircraft. Hundreds of them. Waves of Japanese fighters and bombers arranged in loose formations, black dots against the white cumulus buildups, like a biblical plague of locusts descending on the American fleet. His mind calculates rapidly. If intelligence is right about Japanese pilot quality, and intelligence has been very right lately, most of those aircraft are flown by kids with barely 300 hours of flight time. The veterans, the aces who blooded their noses at Pearl Harbor and Midway and Coral Sea, are dead or grounded. Japan's thrown their training programs into chaos, rushing pilots through abbreviated courses to replace catastrophic losses. They're sending children to do a warrior's work. But children with bombs and torpedoes can still sink carriers. All fighters, this is Vampire Leader. Here's how we play it. High divisions take the fighters. Low divisions nail the bombers before they reach the fleet. Execute. McCampbell shoves his throttle forward, feeling the Hellcat surge with power. His division climbs, angling to intercept a formation of Zeros escorting what looks like Nakajima B-6N Tenzin torpedo bombers -Jills in the American identification system. The range closes quickly. 50 miles. 40. 30. He can see them clearly now through the morning haze. The lead Zeros red Hinamaru, the rising sun stark against green-painted metal. The pilot's head moving in the cockpit, probably searching for threats. Finding them. The Japanese formation breaks. No elegant tactical maneuver, just pure survival instinct. Zeros scatter in all directions. The bombers try to maintain formation but waver, their cohesion crumbling. McCampbell picks his target, a Jill attempting a shallow dive toward the ships below. The bomber pilot thinks altitude loss will save him. He's wrong. McCampbell rolls inverted and pulls, bringing the Hellcat's nose down in a slashing attack from above and behind the killing position. His gun sight tracks across the Jill's fuselage, leading it slightly, compensating for deflection. Range: 400 yards. His finger tightens on the trigger. 6 Brownings unleash hell. The sound is catastrophic even through his leather helmet, a jackhammer roar that shakes the entire airframe. Tracers arc out in lethal streams, every 5th round burning bright so he can see exactly where he's shooting. The Jill's right wing shreds, fabric peeling away, then structural members splintering. Fire blooms orange and black. The bomber rolls violently right and enters a spin, trailing smoke like a dying comet. McCampbell doesn't watch it fall. The dead can't hurt anyone. The living can. He yanks the stick hard left, looking for the next target, and finds himself nose to nose with a Zero in a head-on pass. The Japanese pilot's firing too, yellow muzzle flashes winking from his cowl-mounted guns. It's a contest of nerve. Whoever flinches first dies first. McCampbell doesn't flinch. His rounds smash into the Zero's engine cowling at the last possible second. The enemy fighter's propeller explodes in a shower of metal fragments. McCampbell kicks rudder, standing the Hellcat on its wing, narrowly avoiding collision. The Zero tumbles past, its pilot probably already dead from the devastating fusillade that just cored his engine and cockpit. 2 down in 30 seconds. The sky has become a kaleidoscope of violent motion. Contrails. Tracer fire. Smoke trails from burning aircraft corkscrewing toward the sea. Radio calls overlay each other in a chaos of combat communication. Brake right. On your 6. Scratch 1 Betty. I'm hit, I'm hit. The aerial battlefield stretches across 50 miles of sky, and everywhere McCampbell looks, American Hellcats are savaging the Japanese formations with systematic brutality. He pulls into a climbing turn and nearly collides with a Japanese Judy dive bomber that appears from nowhere, probably separated from its formation, its pilot disoriented and desperate. McCampbell's reaction is pure muscle memory bank hard, rudder to kill the skid, nose up, trigger squeeze. Short burst. The Judy's canopy shatters. The plane snap rolls and begins its final dive. 3. Lieutenant Rushing's voice cuts through the radio chaos. Skipper, you've got a Zero climbing up your 5 o'clock. McCampbell checks his mirror and spots the threat, an aggressive Japanese pilot, probably one of the few veterans left in the mobile fleet, attempting a yo-yo maneuver to gain position. The Zero's lighter weight gives it an advantage in a climbing fight. But McCampbell's got altitude and speed. He uses both. He pushes the nose over hard, converting altitude into velocity, then rolls 90 degrees and pulls, entering a barrel roll that keeps the Zero in sight while denying him a firing solution. The Japanese pilot tries to follow but can't maintain the energy. McCampbell comes out of the role with perfect positioning, high, fast, and directly above his adversary. What follows isn't a dogfight. It's an execution. One long burst from 300 yards. The Zero's fuel tank erupts. No self-sealing tanks on Japanese aircraft, an economy measure that's killing their pilots by the hundreds. The fighter becomes a fireball, arcing down toward the water with terrible grace. 4 kills in less than 3 minutes of combat. McCampbell takes a breath, forcing his heart rate down, forcing himself to think clearly. His Hellcats still performing perfectly. Fuel, half tanks. Ammunition, maybe 1,200 rounds remaining. Plenty of fight left in both man and machine. Below, the American task force maintains formation, their anti-aircraft guns throwing up walls of flak as Japanese bombers attempt suicide runs through the murderous fire. He watches a Judy dive bomber take a direct hit from a 5-inch shell. Their aircraft simply ceases to exist, replaced by an expanding cloud of debris and flame. Another attacker staggers through the barrage, so riddled with holes it's amazing it can still fly, and manages to release its bomb. The weapon splashes harmlessly 50 yards from the carrier Bunker Hill, a towering geyser that collapses back into the sea. Not one Japanese bomb or torpedo has hit its target. Not one. The slaughter continues. McCampbell leads his division back into the fight, climbing for altitude advantage. At 18,000 feet, he spots another wave of Japanese aircraft approaching from the northwest. A mixed formation of Zeros and Zeeks providing cover for a squadron of Kate torpedo bombers. These are older aircraft, relics from the early war, their fabric-covered control surfaces and fixed landing gear marking them as obsolete. That the Japanese are still flying them in 1944 tells McCampbell everything he needs to know about their desperation. Vampire Division. We've got customers at 2 o'clock high.
Zeros crânio torpado bombers.
We take the fighters first. His wingman acknowledges. The division splits into 2 plane elements, each pair working in perfect coordination. A tactical refinement the Americans have spent 2 years perfecting. One aircraft attacks while the other covers. When the attacker becomes vulnerable, the roles reverse. It's a dance the Japanese never fully mastered, and in the crucible of this battle, that failure is costing them everything. McCampbell selects his target, a Zero weaving through the formation, probably flown by a section leader trying to maintain some semblance of tactical discipline. The Japanese pilot sees the Hellcat coming and attempts a hard climbing turn to the right, a textbook defensive maneuver from the playbook written in 1942. But it's 1944 now, and the Hellcat can do things the old Wildcat could only dream of. McCampbell follows the climb, his more powerful engine eating away at the Zero's advantage. The Japanese fighter reaches its apex, hangs for a moment in the sky, then begins to fall off. McCampbell's already there, having anticipated the move. He fires a 4-second burst from 200 yards. His tracers walk up the Zero's fuselage from tail to cockpit. The canopy explodes in a spray of plexiglass and blood. The fighter enters a flat spin, its pilot either dead or incapacitated. 5. Before the Zero even hits the water, McCampbell's rolled right and dove on another target, a Kate trying desperately to reach torpedo release range on the distant carriers. The bomber's rear gunner opens fire, his 7.7mm machine gun spitting defiant tracers that pass harmlessly wide. McCampbell adjusts his approach angle to minimize his exposure and triggers another burst. The Kate's left engine catches fire. The aircraft begins losing altitude, the pilot fighting for control he'll never regain. McCampbell watches long enough to confirm the kill, then breaks away. 6. His radio crackles with Lieutenant Rushing's voice. "Skipper, fuel check. I'm down to a quarter tank." McCampbell glances at his own gauge. He's running low too, but the battle's not over. Copy that. All Vampire aircraft, check your fuel state. Anyone below bingo fuel, RTB immediately. Everyone else, we stay in the fight. 2 of his division planes peel away, heading back toward Essex for refueling and rearming. That leaves 6 Hellcats still in the fight. 6 against. McCampbell scans the sky and counts at least 40 Japanese aircraft still airborne in his immediate vicinity, with more visible in the distance. The odds should be terrifying. Instead, he feels something close to pity. These Japanese pilots are dying because their own navy failed them. Naval intelligence reports, corroborated by interrogations of downed pilots and captured documents, paint a grim picture of Japan's aviation training program, where American pilots receive 600 hours of flight training before their first combat mission, including extensive gunnery practice, formation flying, and tactical instruction. Japanese aviators are being rushed through accelerated programs with as little as 200 hours total flight time. Some have never fired their guns at a maneuvering target. Some have never practiced landing on a carrier deck at night. And now they're facing American pilots who've been doing this for years, flying superior aircraft, supported by radar that can see them coming from 100 miles away. It's not a battle. It's a massacre. McCampbell pulls into a chandelier climbing turn that bleeds speed for altitude and surveys the aerial battlefield. The scope of the carnage is staggering. Dozens of aircraft are falling from the sky, most of them trailing smoke or flame. Some pilots are bailing out, their parachutes blossoming white against the blue, but many go down with their aircraft, either killed by gunfire or unable to escape. The Pacific below is littered with debris and oil slicks, the surface of the water marked by the graves of men who took off this morning with hope and determination and found only death. Vampire leader. Base. Radar shows another raid forming up, bearing 285, distance 40 miles. Looks like they're launching everything they've got. McCampbell's jaw tightens. Admiral Ozawa is committed now, throwing every available aircraft at the American fleet in waves, hoping that sheer numbers will overwhelm the defenses. It's a strategy born of desperation, and it's failing catastrophically. But even a failed attack can get lucky. One bomb in the right place. One torpedo into a carrier's vitals. That's all it takes to turn a slaughter into a tragedy. Roger. Base. Moving to intercept. He banks west, his remaining 5 Hellcats forming up on his wings. They climb through 20,000 feet, and McCampbell can see the new wave approaching, another massive formation, perhaps 150 aircraft, arranged in loose groups at varying altitudes. The Japanese are adapting, trying to saturate the American defenses by attacking from multiple vectors simultaneously. It might have worked against a smaller force. Against Task Force 58, with its seemingly inexhaustible supply of fighters and its radar-directed combat air patrol, it's just feeding more aircraft into the meat grinder. A group of Judies breaks from the main formation, attempting a dive-bombing run on the nearest carrier group. McCampbell identifies the target USS Lexington, Admiral Mark Mitch's flagship. He angles to intercept, pushing his throttle to the firewall. The Hellcat responds instantly, the big radial engine roaring. He overtakes the Judies at 12,000 feet, approaching from their 7 o'clock their blind spot. The dive bombers are flying in a tight 3-plane V formation, their pilots focused on lining up their attack run, oblivious to the Predator closing from behind. McCampbell settles in behind the left-wing aircraft, so close he can see the pilot's head through the rear canopy section, can see the rivets in the aluminum skin, can see the bomb hanging beneath the fuselage. He fires. A long, sustained burst that empties nearly 200 rounds into the Judy's empennage and fuselage. The tail section disintegrates. The dive bomber snap rolls left, colliding with the formation leader in a catastrophic mid-air collision. Both aircraft explode, their bombs detonating sympathetically. The third Judy, showered with debris, tries to evade but loses control and enters an inverted spin. 3 kills in 5 seconds. 7, 8, and 9 for the day. McCampbell's ammunition counter is running low now, maybe 600 rounds left. Enough for 2, maybe 3 more engagements if he's conservative. He's been in the air for nearly 2 hours, and his fuel gauge is kissing the red line. He should return to the carrier. A good commander knows when to break off and rearm. But the Japanese are still coming. He spots a lone Zero making a desperate run at a damaged Helldiver limping back toward the fleet, its pilot wounded, its hydraulics shot out. The Zero pilot sees easy prey. He's wrong. McCampbell dives, building speed, his airframe groaning under the G-forces. The Zero never sees him coming. A 3-second burst from dead astern. The Japanese fighter's engine seizes, black smoke pouring from the cowling. The pilot bails out, his parachute opening just before his aircraft impacts the water. 10 kills. Vampire leader, this is rushing. Skipper, your Winchester and near bingo fuel. You need to get back to the ship. Rushing's right, of course. McCampbell's flying on fumes and empty guns. But as he begins his turn back toward Essex, he sees another formation of Japanese bombers making a run at the task force, and he knows he can't leave. Not yet. Not while his shipmates are in danger. Vampire Division, I'm making one more pass. Anyone who's got gas and ammo, follow me in. Everyone else, RTB. 3 Hellcats stay with him. 3 pilots who trust their commander enough to push their fuel and ammunition to the absolute limit. They dive into the Japanese formation like hawks among pigeons. McCampbell lines up on a Kate, realizes he's out of ammunition, and does something that will become legendary in squadron ready rooms for the rest of the war. He flies formation with the Japanese bomber, positioning his Hellcat directly alongside, close enough to see the terrified faces of the pilot and gunner. He matches their speed, their altitude, their heading, and just stays there. The psychological impact is devastating. The Kate's pilot, already stressed beyond endurance, panics. He breaks formation, dives away from McCampbell's Hellcat, and flies straight into the concentrated anti-aircraft fire from the destroyer screen below. The bomber disintegrates in a wall of flak. McCampbell didn't fire a shot. 11 kills. His fuel warning light illuminates, a red glow that means he's got maybe 15 minutes of flight time remaining. He points the Hellcat's nose toward Essex and begins the long glide home, his engine throttled back to conserve every drop of fuel. Below, the battle continues. American Hellcats are still tearing through Japanese formations with impunity. The sea is carpeted with wreckage. McCampbell counts at least 30 distinct crash sites visible from his altitude, and that's just in his immediate area. Multiply that across the entire 50-mile radius of the engagement, and the numbers become almost incomprehensible. The radio net is alive with kill confirmations. Splash 2 Judies. Nailed 3 zeros over the picket line. Kate burning in, no shoot. The American pilots are running up scores that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. Some will claim 5 kills today. Some will claim 7. A few will claim double digits. But McCampbell's 11 kills in one mission puts him in a category by himself. He spots Essex ahead, her deck crowded with aircraft being refueled and rearmed for the next launch. The landing signal officer is already bringing planes aboard in a continuous cycle, one Hellcat touching down every 60 seconds. McCampbell joins the landing pattern, extending his landing gear, dropping his flaps, adjusting his airspeed to exactly 85 knots. The LSO guides him in with practice signals. McCampbell floats over the stern, cuts his throttle at the LSO signal, and drops onto the deck. His tailhook catches the number 3 arresting wire. The Hellcat jerks to a stop in less than 200 feet. Deck crew rush forward, releasing the wire, pushing the fighter clear of the landing area to make room for the next aircraft. McCampbell climbs out of the cockpit, his legs shaky from 2 hours of combat tension, his flight suit soaked through with sweat. An ordnance man is already inspecting his guns, confirming what McCampbell already knows, completely empty. Another crew member is checking the bullet holes in his wing's 5 punctures from enemy fire that McCampbell didn't even notice during the fight. Lieutenant Commander Paul Buey, the squadron operations officer, is waiting with a clipboard and an expression somewhere between awe and disbelief. "Skipper, we need to debrief. How many confirmed?" 11, McCampbell says, his voice hoarse from breathing pure oxygen for 2 hours. 2 Judies, 6 zeros, 2 Kates, 1 Jill. All confirmed. Buey's pencil hovers over the paper. Jesus Christ. 11 in one mission. That's what I saw go down. Around them, other pilots are landing, climbing out of their Hellcats, all talking at once, hands gesturing wildly as they describe the fight. The common theme, easy kills. Targets everywhere. Japanese pilots who couldn't maneuver, couldn't shoot, couldn't survive. McCampbell looks west, toward the horizon where the battle is still raging. "Paul, how many have we lost?" Buey checks his board. From Air Group 15? 1 Hellcat down, pilot recovered. From the entire task force? Maybe 2 dozen aircraft total. Most of the pilots are safe. 24 American aircraft lost. Against how many Japanese? The answer comes an hour later, when intelligence officers compile the initial damage assessment. The numbers are so staggering that Admiral Mitchell initially refuses to believe them. But radar plots, gun camera footage, pilot debriefs, and visual confirmation from the fleet all tell the same story. The Japanese mobile fleet has lost approximately 300 aircraft in the day's first engagement alone. 300 aircraft. Gone. Shot down or crashed into the sea. The pilots, the irreplaceable, desperately trained pilots, dead or drowning. And Admiral Ozawa is preparing to launch another strike. June 20th, 1944.
6:47 Uhr morgens.
Ready Room, USS Essex. McCampbell sits in a metal folding chair, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, studying the intelligence summary from yesterday's engagement. The final tally makes his stomach turn: 373 Japanese aircraft destroyed, against 29 American losses. The ratio is so lopsided it barely qualifies as combatant's extermination. And yet, his tactical briefing map shows Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet is still out there, still steaming within strike range, still refusing to withdraw. The ready room is packed with pilots, their flight suits already dark with sweat despite the early hour. The ventilation system struggles against the equatorial heat, and the air smells of coffee, hydraulic fluid, and nervous tension. On the bulkhead, someone has chalked a scoreboard: Japs, 373, US, 29. Below it, a sardonic addition: Turkey Season Open. The name is already sticking. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Some of the younger pilots find it funny. McCampbell finds it tragic. Those 373 aircraft carried 373 pilotsmen who woke up yesterday morning, ate breakfast, wrote letters home, kissed photographs of wives and children, and climbed into their cockpits believing they could change the course of the war. Now they're at the bottom of the Philippine Sea, and the war grinds on without them. Commander William Dean, the Air Group Intelligence Officer, enters with fresh reconnaissance photographs still damp from the developing tanks. Gentlemen, listen up. Overnight snooper flights have located the Japanese fleet. They're approximately 275 miles west-northwest of our position, heading... well, they're not heading anywhere. They're maintaining station. A murmur runs through the assembled pilots. Maintaining station? After losing nearly 400 aircraft? Either Ozawa is preparing another strike, or he's lost his mind. Dean continues, Admiral Mitchell is authorizing offensive operations. We're going after them. Launch time is 16:30 hours, that's 4:30 p.m. for you nuggets who can't tell military time. This means we'll be recovering aircraft after dark. Night carrier landings in combat conditions. He pauses, letting that sink in. This is going to be dangerous, gentlemen. More dangerous than anything you did yesterday. McCampbell knows what Dean isn't saying. Night carrier landings kill pilots. Even in perfect conditions, bringing a fighter down onto a pitching deck in darkness requires precision that borders on supernatural. Add in battle damage, fuel exhaustion, and pilots who've been in combat for hours, and the casualty rate can rival enemy action. But the opportunity is too good to pass up. The Japanese fleet is wounded, its air cover decimated. If Task Force 58 can strike now, they might sink every Japanese carrier in the Pacific. The war could effectively end in one afternoon. Air Group 15 will launch 54 aircraft, Dean says. Hellcats, Helldivers, and Avengers. Commander McCampbell will lead the fighter escort. Your primary mission is to suppress enemy combat air patrol and protect our strike aircraft. Secondary mission, targets of opportunity on the Japanese carriers themselves. McCampbell drains his coffee and stands. All right, listen up. What we did yesterday was defense. Today we're taking the fight to them. The Japanese will throw everything they have left at us, which means we'll be outnumbered over their fleet. But we've got better training, better aircraft, and better tactics. Stick with your wingmen. Conserve ammunition. If you damage your aircraft, don't try to be a hero head for home immediately. I need every pilot back alive. Questions? A young ensign raises his hand. Skipper, intelligence says the Japs only have about 50 fighters left. Is that accurate? 50 operational fighters across their entire mobile fleet, McCampbell confirms. Out of nearly 450 they started with 3 days ago. That tells you everything you need to know about yesterday. But those 50 will be their best, the survivors, the ones who were good enough or lucky enough to make it through the turkey shoot. Don't underestimate them. The briefing breaks up. Pilots file out toward the flight deck, checking their gear, adjusting their holsters, running through mental checklists. McCampbell walks the length of Essex's hangar deck, inspecting his Hellcat. The armorers have loaded fresh ammunition belts too, 400 rounds total. The plane captain has patched the bullet holes and topped off the fuel tanks. The aircraft is as ready as human hands can make it. At 4:15 p.m., McCampbell climbs into the cockpit. The deck crew straps him in, checks his oxygen connections, confirms his radio is functioning. At 4:28 p.m., the launch officer signals for engine start. 54 propellers spin to life, 54 radial engines roar. At exactly 4:30 p.m., McCampbell's Hellcat lurches forward, catapulted off Essex's bow at 90 miles per hour. 3 seconds later, he's airborne. The strike group forms up over the task force, 16 Hellcats on fighter escort, 26 Helldiver dive bombers, and 12 Avenger torpedo bombers. McCampbell leads them west-northwest, climbing to 15,000 feet, following a heading provided by the ship's Combat Information Center. The sun is already descending toward the horizon. They'll reach the Japanese fleet with perhaps 90 minutes of daylight remaining. The return flight will be in full darkness. 2 hours into the flight, Lieutenant Rushing's voice breaks radio silence. "Skipper, radar contact bearing 330, range 40 miles. Multiple bogeys." McCampbell scans the distant sky and spots them, a combat air patrol of perhaps 20 Japanese fighters stacked at various altitudes above their fleet. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But they'll fight anyway, because that's what warriors do. All Hellcat escorts. This is Vampire Leader. We've got customers. Let's clear the sky for our strike group. Divisions 1 and 2, take the high cap. Divisions 3 and 4, stay with the bombers until their feet dry over the targets. He advances his throttle and climbs, leading 8 Hellcats toward the upper layer of Japanese fighters. As the range closes, he identifies them, all zeros, arranged in a loose defensive weave. These pilots know what they're doing, survivors from yesterday's carnage, trying to use the Zero's superior maneuverability to offset the Hellcat's advantages in speed and firepower. But knowledge and skill can't overcome mathematics. 8 American fighters against 10 Japanese, with 8 more Hellcats ready to support if needed. The outcome is never in doubt. McCampbell selects his first target, a Zero flying top cover about 1,000 feet above the main formation. The Japanese pilot spots the Hellcats climbing toward him and initiates a split-S rolling inverted and pulling through, attempting to dive away and gain speed. Standard tactic. McCampbell anticipates it, adjusts his angle of attack, and fires a deflection shot that catches the Zero as it completes the maneuver. Hits sparkle along the fuselage. The Zero's canopy shatters. The fighter enters a spin, trailing smoke. 12 kills total. 1 more than yesterday's personal record. The remaining Zeros scatter, abandoning formation discipline in favor of individual survival. It's a mistake. American pilots have spent 2 years perfecting the art of teamwork, and they exploit the opening with ruthless efficiency. McCampbell's wingman, Rushing, flames a Zero attempting to climb away. 2 more Hellcats double-team another Japanese fighter, chopping it to pieces with converging fire from 2 angles. Within 3 minutes, 7 Zeros are falling toward the ocean. The survivors dive toward their fleet, hoping the anti-aircraft gunners below won't shoot them down by mistake. McCampbell doesn't pursue. His job is protecting the strike group, not racking up kills. He banks right, checking on the bombers. The Helldivers and Avengers are already pushing over into their attack dives, having identified targets among the Japanese fleet below: carriers, battleships, cruisers arranged in defensive formations, their decks crowded with aircraft that will never fly again. Black puffs of anti-aircraft fire begin blossoming around the American strike aircraft. The Japanese gunners are good, experienced, disciplined, throwing up walls of flak that fill the sky with deadly shrapnel. McCampbell watches a Helldiver take a direct hit, the aircraft coming apart in mid-air, scattering debris across 1,000 yards of sky. The pilot and gunner never had a chance to bail out, but the rest press home their attacks. McCampbell sees bombs falling, watch their trajectories, sees explosions rippling across the deck of a large carrier later identified as Zuikaku, one of the carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor. Flames leap hundreds of feet into the air. Secondary explosions follow as fueled and armed aircraft on the hangar deck detonate. The carrier's anti-aircraft fire slackens, then stops entirely. An Avenger scores a torpedo hit on a battleship, the weapon striking amidships with a massive detonation that sends a geyser of water and steel skyward. The battleship lists to port, flooding, already doomed. The strike lasts 7 minutes. Then the American aircraft are clawing for altitude, forming up for the long flight home, and McCampbell's taking stock. They've damaged at least 3 carriers and sunk 2 oilers' critical losses for a fleet already critically short of fuel. But the price was high, 5 American aircraft shot down, plus the unknowable number that may have been damaged badly enough that they won't make it home. All aircraft. This is Vampire Leader. Form up by divisions and follow me home. Maintain formation discipline. Conserve fuel. We've got a long night ahead. The sun sets as they fly east, and within 30 minutes, they're flying in full darkness.
No mon. No heraisen.
Just stars above and black ocean below. McCampbell navigates by compass heading and dead reckoning, trusting his instruments, trusting his experience. Behind him, 50 aircraft follow his navigation lights, a string of green and red beacons in the void. 2 hours into the return flight, aircraft begin reporting fuel emergencies. An Avenger radios that it's running on fumes. A Helldiver reports its engine is overheating. The formations begin to fray as damaged aircraft fall behind, unable to maintain speed. Then, like a miracle, McCampbell spots lights ahead. Admiral Mitchell has ordered every ship in Task Force 58 to illuminate running lights, searchlights, even star shells fired into the sky creating a beacon that can be seen for 100 miles. It's a massive breach of blackout procedures, potentially exposing the fleet to submarine attack, but Mitchell has made his choice: save the pilots. McCampbell guides his aircraft toward Essex, joining the landing pattern behind a dozen other fighters. The carrier's flight deck is a chaos of motion, aircraft landing every 30 seconds, deck crews rushing to clear the landing area, firefighting teams standing by with foam and water in case something goes wrong. His turn comes. He lines up on Essex's stern, drops his landing gear and flaps, adjusts his speed. The landing signal officer's paddles glow in the darkness. McCampbell follows the signals, cuts his throttle, drops onto the deck. His tailhook snags the wire. Safe. He climbs out of the cockpit on shaking legs and watches the controlled chaos around him. Aircraft are landing on every carrier in the task force. Some are crashing wheels up landings, broken arresting gear, aircraft sliding off the deck into the water. But the pilots are surviving, most of them, plucked from the water by destroyer crews who risk their own ships to save aviators. By midnight, the recovery is complete. Of the 216 aircraft that launched from Task Force 58 that afternoon, 209 have returned or their pilots have been rescued. 7 crews are lost. Against that, the Americans have inflicted catastrophic damage on the mobile fleet. 2 carriers sinking, 3 more badly damaged, and critically, the last of Japan's experienced carrier pilots are gone. McCampbell heads to the wardroom for debriefing, where intelligence officers are already compiling loss assessments. The 2-day total is staggering, over 600 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Japan's carrier air power has been effectively annihilated. The mobile fleet still exists, but it exists as targets, not as a fighting force. In the ready room, someone updates the scoreboard. Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japs 600 plus, US 123. Below it, a new edition, Turkey season, limit reached. McCampbell stares at the numbers and thinks about the Japanese pilots who died today. Young men, poorly trained, thrown into combat against overwhelming odds by commanders who had no other choice. Japan's pilot training program collapsed under the weight of its own losses, unable to replace the veterans killed at Midway, the Solomons, New Guinea. The men flying off Japanese carriers yesterday weren't warriors, they were sacrifices. And tomorrow, or the next day, or the next, McCampbell knows he'll be back in his Hellcat, hunting whatever survivors remain. Because that's what war demands. That's what victory requires. June 21st, 1944. 2:14 p.m. Commander's cabin, USS Essex. McCampbell sits at his desk, drafting the after-action report that will eventually reach Admiral Chester Nimitz, Admiral Ernest King, and ultimately President Roosevelt himself. The words come hard. How do you describe the systematic destruction of an entire naval air force in clinical, professional terms? How do you quantify what he witnessed over the Philippine Sea? He writes, enemy pilot quality observed to be significantly degraded from previous encounters. Japanese aviators displayed poor formation discipline, inadequate gunnery skills, and lack of tactical awareness. Numerous instances of enemy pilots failing to execute basic defensive maneuvers. Assessment: Japanese carrier aviation training program has collapsed. Current enemy pilot proficiency estimated at 30% of 1942 standards. It's the most damning intelligence assessment McCampbell has ever written, and every word is true. He's been fighting Japanese pilots since 1943, and has watched their quality deteriorate month by month. The aces who blooded America's nose at Pearl Harbor and the Coral Sea are gone dead, grounded, or assigned to training duties they can't adequately fulfill. In their place, teenagers with 200 hours of flight time, pushed through abbreviated courses, sent into combat with skills barely sufficient to land on a carrier, let alone fight in one. A knock at his door. Lieutenant Commander Buey enters with a folder marked Confidential, Intelligence Summary. Skipper, you need to see this. We've been interrogating a Japanese pilot we fished out of the water yesterday. His story confirms everything we suspected. McCampbell takes the folder and reads. The pilot, a 19-year-old named Nakamura, trained for 7 months less than half the time his predecessors received. His gunnery training consisted of 20 training flights. 20. American pilots fire thousands of practice rounds before their first combat mission. Nakamura fired perhaps 500 rounds total before yesterday, when he climbed into his Zero and flew into the Turkey Shoot. He lasted 11 minutes before McCampbell's wingman shot him down. There's more, Buey says. He says most of the pilots in his squadron had never practiced a carrier landing in darkness. Some had never fired their guns at a moving target. The veterans in his air group were trying to teach them tactics, but there wasn't enough time. They launched from the carriers knowing they were inadequate. McCampbell closes the folder, suddenly exhausted. They sent these kids to die. Yes, sir. And according to Nakamura, the Japanese Naval Command knows it. They're running out of experienced instructors, running out of fuel for training flights, running out of time. The pilot pipeline is broken. It's confirmation of what McCampbell has been reporting for months. Japan's strategy of attrition has backfired catastrophically. Every veteran pilot they lost early in the war represented thousands of hours of institutional knowledge, years of experience, irreplaceable expertise. They gambled that they could win quickly, before American industrial production overwhelmed them. They lost that gamble. Now they're paying the price in blood. McCampbell stands and walks to the porthole, staring out at the Pacific. Somewhere out there, what's left of the Japanese mobile fleet is limping back toward Okinawa, its carriers gutted, its air wings annihilated. Admiral Ozawa managed to save most of his surface ships, but without aircraft, they're just expensive targets. Paul, get me a full assessment of Japanese carrier aviation capability. I want numbers. How many aircraft do they have left? How many pilots? What's their pilot production rate versus their loss rate? I want to know when they'll run out completely. Buey makes notes. Sir, if we're right about their training pipeline being broken, they might already be at the breaking point. They can't replace losses faster than we're inflicting them. Then we keep the pressure on. We don't let them rebuild. We don't give them time to train new pilots. We finish this. October 24, 1944.
7:42 morgens.
20,000 feet above Leyte Gulf, Philippines. For months have passed since the Turkey Shoot. Task Force 38, formerly Task Force 58, redesignated under Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet, is supporting the invasion of the Philippines. MacArthur has returned, just as he promised. And the Japanese Navy, desperate and dying, is making one final attempt to stop the American advance. McCampbell leads a fighter sweep ahead of the fleet, 8 Hellcats searching for the Japanese surface force that intelligence says is approaching through the Philippine Sea. His score has grown steadily through the summer, 18 confirmed kills, making him one of the Navy's top aces. But the hunting has gotten harder. There are fewer Japanese aircraft in the sky now, and most of what remains are used for kamikaze attacks one-way missions where pilot skill is irrelevant. His radio crackles. Vampire leader, this is Big Blue. Radar contact bearing 295, range 70 miles. Raid count.
Jesus.
Raid count shows 60+ bandits inbound. Looks like they're trying for the invasion fleet. 60 aircraft. It's a major strike by current Japanese standards, probably everything Admiral Kurita's force can put in the air. McCampbell checks his fuel, his ammunition, his wingman's position. Everything's green. Roger. Big Blue. We're moving to intercept. He banks toward the contact, climbing for altitude advantage. The Hellcat responds smoothly, the big Pratt & Whitney engine pulling strong. After 18 months of combat flying, this aircraft has become an extension of his body. He doesn't think about the controls anymore. He thinks about maneuvers and the airplane simply obeys. 20 minutes later, he spots them, a massive formation of Japanese aircraft stacked between 10,000 and 18,000 feet. Zeros providing escort for a mixed group of bombers Judys, Jills, Kates, even some obsolete Vals that Japan has pressed back into service out of sheer desperation. The formation is ragged, the spacing poor. McCampbell counts at least 40 aircraft in his immediate field of view. And he has 7 Hellcats. Any rational commander would call for reinforcements, wait for more fighters to arrive before engaging. But the Japanese are heading straight for the invasion beaches, where thousands of American soldiers are vulnerable, where transports and supply ships are anchored in neat, defensible rows. If those bombers get through, hundreds of men will die. McCampbell makes his decision. All Vampire aircraft, we're going in. Divisions, stay together. Target the bombers first. Don't chase the fighters unless they threaten you. By the numbers, boys. Let's go to work. He rolls inverted and pulls, diving toward the enemy formation from high and behind the perfect attack position. His Hellcat accelerates to 400 miles per hour. The first Japanese aircraft in his sights is a Judy dive bomber, flying straight and level, its pilot oblivious. McCampbell fires a 2-second burst. The Judy's right wing folds upward, ripping free from the fuselage. The bomber tumbles earthward. 19 kills. He pulls up, clearing his 6 o'clock, and immediately spots another target, a Zero climbing to intercept him. The Japanese pilot is aggressive, trying to use his fighter's superior turning ability. But McCampbell's got speed and altitude. He extends away, climbing, forcing the Zero to follow. The Japanese pilot makes the mistake of trying to pursue uphill. McCampbell reverses at the top of his climb, rolls inverted, and comes down on the Zero from above. One burst. The Zero's canopy explodes. The fighter enters a spin. 20 kills. The dogfight dissolves into chaos. 7 Hellcats against 60 Japanese aircraft should be suicide. Instead, it's a masterclass in tactical aviation. McCampbell's pilots work in pairs, covering each other, never allowing themselves to be isolated, exploiting every advantage their superior training and equipment provides. They slash through the Japanese formation like knives, cutting down bombers, evading fighters, maintaining situational awareness that the enemy pilots simply don't possess. McCampbell's gun camera will later show the sequence: a Jill torpedo bomber, then a Zero, then another Jill, then a Judy. 4 kills in 6 minutes. His ammunition counter drops toward 0. 23 total kills. He's down to perhaps 200 rounds, enough for 1, maybe 2 more bursts when he spots a straggling Kate trying to sneak through at wave-top altitude. The bomber pilot thinks he's safe down there, below the American fighter's attention. He's wrong. McCampbell dives, levels out 50 feet above the water, closes to 150 yards, and fires his last ammunition. The Kate's left engine disintegrates. The bomber cartwheels into the Pacific in a geyser of white water. 24 kills. And his guns are empty. But the battle isn't over. There are still Japanese bombers heading toward the invasion fleet, still Zeros trying to protect them. McCampbell can't shoot anymore, but he can disrupt. He positions his Hellcat alongside a formation of 3 Vals, flying in close formation with them, matching their every move. The psychological impact is devastating. The Japanese pilots, already stressed, already aware they're losing this fight, see an American fighter pacing them with empty guns and supreme confidence, and they break. One Val peels away and dives for the deck. Another turns back toward its carrier. The third continues toward the target but is so rattled it drops its bomb 500 yards wide of the nearest ship. Lieutenant Rushing's voice cuts through the radio chatter. "Skipper, you're Winchester and we're all running low on gas. We need to RTB." McCampbell takes one last look at the carnage around him. The sky is full of falling aircraft, smoke trails, parachutes. The Japanese formation has been shattered. Maybe 20 of the original 60 aircraft are still airborne, and most of those are fleeing. The invasion fleet is safe. All Vampire aircraft. This is Leader. Form up on me. We're going home. The flight back to Essex is quiet. McCampbell mentally reviews the engagement, counting his kills, assessing his performance. When he lands and climbs out of his cockpit, an ordnance man is already inspecting his guns. "Sir, you're completely empty. Not a single round left." "I know." The debriefing takes 2 hours. McCampbell's gun camera footage confirms 6 kills in this single mission, bringing his total to 24. But the real story is what his wingmen accomplished. Another 11 Japanese aircraft destroyed. 18 total kills by 7 American fighters. Against 60. Commander Buey sits across from McCampbell, his expression troubled. "Skipper, this is getting easier. Too easy." The Japanese pilots we're seeing now, they're not even trying to fight. They're just trying to survive long enough to deliver their bombs. "I know," McCampbell says quietly. "We broke them. At the Philippine Sea, we broke their entire carrier aviation program. These pilots flying now, they are the bottom of the barrel. Kids with minimal training, obsolete tactics, no chance of victory. They are sacrifices. How much longer can they sustain losses like this? They can't. We're killing pilots faster than they can train them. Their fuel reserves are depleted, so they can't run adequate training programs even if they had instructors, which they don't, because we killed those at Midway and the Solomons. It's a death spiral. Every mission we fly, we make it worse for them." Buey leans back, digesting this. "So we've won. The carrier war is over." "The carrier war is over," McCampbell confirms. "Japan's got maybe 100 experienced carrier pilots left in their entire navy. Maybe. And they're burning through them on kamikaze missions because that's the only tactic left that doesn't require skill. They're finished." October 28, 1944. Intelligence Brief. USS Essex. The assessment McCampbell has been writing for months is finally complete. It's classified secret and addressed to SINCPAC Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet. The conclusions are stark. Japanese carrier aviation has ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. Current enemy pilot quality is inadequate for basic combat operations. Enemy training programs cannot produce replacement pilots at rates sufficient to offset combat losses. Estimate Japanese Navy has fewer than 100 experienced carrier-qualified pilots remaining. Recommend continued offensive operations to prevent reconstitution of enemy air capability. He includes detailed statistics. Before the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japan had approximately 450 carrier aircraft and pilots. After the battle, fewer than 80. Current status, 4 months later, approximately 150 aircraft, but perhaps only 100 qualified pilots, many of whom are being expended in kamikaze operations. The report includes testimony from captured pilots, analysis of enemy tactics, assessment of training standards. Everything points to the same conclusion. Japan's pilot shortage has become terminal. McCampbell's own kill total now stands at 24 confirmed victories, but he estimates the number is actually higher, perhaps 28 if you count the aircraft he forced to crash without directly shooting them down. He's become the Navy's second highest scoring ace, and he accomplished it by exploiting Japan's fatal weakness, their inability to train pilots fast enough to replace losses. He writes a final paragraph. The Japanese bet everything on a short war with decisive carrier battles. When those battles went against them, they lost not just ships and aircraft, but their experienced pilot cadre, the men who could train the next generation. What we're seeing now is the result: inadequately trained pilots flying obsolete tactics in inferior aircraft. They fight bravely, but bravery cannot compensate for the systemic collapse of their training pipeline. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was not an aberration. It was inevitable. November 2nd, 1944. Wardroom, USS Essex. McCampbell has been called to a meeting with Admiral Mitcher, flown by helicopter to the flagship Lexington. When he enters the Admiral's quarters, Mitcher is studying reconnaissance photographs of Japanese airfields in the Philippines. "Commander McCampbell," Mitcher says without preamble, "your report on Japanese pilot quality has reached Washington. Admiral King wants confirmation. Is it really as bad as you're saying?" "Sir, it's worse. The pilots we're facing now have maybe 200 hours total flight time. Most have never practiced gunnery against maneuvering targets. Their formation discipline is non-existent. They're sending teenagers to do a veteran's job." Mitcher nods slowly. "And their pilot production rate?" "Collapsed, sir. They don't have fuel for training. They don't have experienced instructors. They don't have time. We're killing pilots faster than they graduate new ones. At current loss rates, they'll be functionally out of carrier pilots by spring. So when you shot down 9 aircraft in one mission last week, most of them never saw me coming, sir. Poor situational awareness. No mutual support. They're brave, but they're not competent. Not anymore." Mitcher sets down the photographs. "Commander, you've been in continuous combat operations for 18 months. You've flown 140 combat missions. You've shot down 24 enemy aircraft confirmed, possibly 28 total. You're exhausted. I'm sending you stateside for a war bond tour and as an instructor. The pilots here can finish the job." McCampbell wants to argue, wants to say he's fine, that he can keep flying. But the truth is, Mitcher's right. He's exhausted. He's been fighting for so long that he's forgotten what peace feels like. And the war is won, at least the carrier war. What remains is cleanup. "Yes, sir. When do I rotate out?" "Next month. Use the time to brief your replacement." "And Commander, that report you wrote? It's going to change how we think about naval aviation doctrine. Training pipelines, pilot replacement rates, institutional knowledge preservation UVE identified the critical vulnerability. We won't make the same mistakes Japan made." McCampbell leaves the meeting and returns to Essex, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Somewhere to the west, what's left of the Japanese Navy is still fighting, still dying, still refusing to surrender. But their carriers sit empty. Their flight decks are silent. The pilots are gone. He thinks about the Turkey Shoot, about 600 Japanese aircraft falling from the sky in 2 days, about the young pilots who died because their nation's training program collapsed under the weight of American industrial might and tactical superiority. He thinks about Nakamura, the 19-year-old with 7 months of training, who never had a chance. War is mathematics, McCampbell realizes. Japan lost the war the moment they couldn't replace their veterans fast enough. Everything after that was just arithmetic, a slow, bloody calculation leading inexorably to defeat. He's killed 28 enemy aircraft. 28 pilots who won't train the next generation, who won't pass on their hard-won knowledge, who won't help Japan rebuild what the Turkey Shoot destroyed. In the cold logic of total war, those kills matter more than any bomb or torpedo. They represent the permanent erosion of Japan's ability to fight. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot didn't just sink ships. It murdered the future. And McCampbell, ace pilot and professional warrior, carries that knowledge with him as the sun disappears below the horizon and another day of war bleeds into history.